Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Atavus Football Show. I'm Jake Swilly along with my man Scott Lawyer once again. Scott, how you doing?
Jake, I'm doing good. I'm doing a little bit better now. I don't have to watch that Thursday night game last night, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot of talking points last night on social media and whatnot coming out of that.
Right.
Not what people probably want for a Thursday night game in prime time, but yeah, we got a lot about that coming up later. Our main topic for today being, I think a lot of what we see now is the first 3 to 4 weeks are really like the preseason in a sense for the regular season and teams going forward because no one plays in the preseason anymore. So that's going to be our main topic for today, the NFL's regular season's preseason in a sense. Those 3 to 4 weeks of what have we learned, what kind of play have we seen and stuff like that going forward. So we'll get into that main discussion. Scott and I each have a few topics and takeaways from this first part of the year that we want to dive into. But first and always, like I said, before we get to that, go over our news, highlights, and recaps from the previous week. We'll jump straight into it again with our In the Spotlight series. We do have another tackle clip. This time it's not from Park High School. They're still doing great out there, but we are going to highlight one of our other clients today as well. Just give me a second here. Make sure I can pull this up. So, Scott, what we got is Lawrence Tech here from our college client out of Michigan, so take it away.
There you go. Shout out to Lawrence Tech. So, yeah, great tackle. Here what we're going to see is another turnover that's forced by good technique. So you're going to see here defensive back does a great job. The quarterback kind of breaks the pocket. What I like about it is you see the guy scoop and score. That's really important, really critical in this game. But right here, watch from the back end, Jay, you can see a great same foot, same shoulder, punches that score, changes the momentum of this game. You know, they had a pretty great performance in the second half, but they ended up winning this game by a good margin. It was really with plays like this. So they were scoring touchdowns, turning the ball over, and really good tackle technique as well.
Yeah, no, Scott, for sure. Another highlight this week of just that near foot, near shoulder, effective punch, leading to another turnover. We saw that last week with your highlight from Park High School. We see it again, and I think a lot of times people like to argue the head across, get the face mask on the ball sort of things. That'll help pop it out and stuff. But that's not what we see. You look on Saturdays and Sundays, and the common thing you see there is people punching. And, ultimately they're going for the punch at that level to get the ball out. But if you break it down from an Atavus perspective, that's almost exactly what we want. They end up striking with the near shoulder, punching with that near arm. So we see that in play here again. I think that's kind of the way to go. And we see it proven to be effective week in and week out.
Without a doubt. And just rallying to the ball, right? Having hats to the ball. Usually it's that secondary fitter that might be able to get that punch out, and guys getting held up with great form, and your second guy comes in and rakes the ball out or punches the ball out. So that's really important too when it comes to forcing turnovers, is just a lot of hats to the ball.
For sure. So we do actually have, Scott, one more clip we would like to show and get your this is a surprise clip.
Bobby Wagner,
let's put it out here.
Talking him.
Oh, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Yo, man, that was great. That was from last night, actually. So had a great opportunity to work with the Mercer Island youth program here in Washington. And here, Coach did a great job of giving me a good demonstration buddy for this drill. But really simple. These are our two-step strike drill. So it's supposed to be pretty low impact. But you see, I get a good strike on Coach here. And the team loved it. The kids loved it. But thanks for throwing that in there, Jake. I think it's really important to be able to show the kids when you're talking to them about it and be able to see that, hey, we can be really physical without the pads. And I think I got my message very clear last night. So thanks for throwing that one in there, man. Appreciate the love.
Of course. No, I feel for the coach right there too, because I've been on the other end of your teaching moments and examples as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely don't know always how to slow down. But again, like you said, it's amazing what you can do. Like we like to show that how impactful and effective and how, that level of contact you can still bring without pads using our system and our practicing techniques and drills and whatnot. So, and on top of that,
75% too as well, Jake. See, like you said, I don't know what half speed. I only know full throttle. So I felt bad for Coach because he's like, man, I have never been hit like that before. I was only supposed to be 75%. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, man. And I technically was 75%. So, what you know is that we can go better. We can do more. So,
Well, let's keep in mind, too, your former D1 Pac-12 linebacker right here, 75% is probably 100, 120% for most people. So,
give him the benefit of the doubt right there.
No, for sure. But no, great to be able to see you get out there. Like I said, we love to connect with our schools around here and across the country to not only do stuff, online and stuff like that, but really get in person on the field with them and interact and kind of show them firsthand what we're about. So great to see you out there last night. And another good example of what we do. So, all right, let's get into the college front then. College corner. Let's start off with a recap from last week. Scott, walk us through what you saw from the scoreboard of the top 25. Yeah,
so, like we always say, I feel like right now in the first 5 weeks or so of the college football, it's been pretty, I would say there's been some upsets for sure, but the last couple of weeks has kind of tapered off in terms of we know what to expect. So, Georgia, they're actually behind Missouri most of the game. And like we mentioned, that quarterback, he just knows what to do. He got the tight ends involved. They stuck to the run, played good defense in that fourth quarter, and they're able to come back against Missouri. Alabama took care of business, but a big topic there was losing that quarterback, Bryce Young. So we'll see how he comes back. But obviously with the great defense and the good running game and all those assets around them, it's pretty easy to have another guy come in and kind of finish off the job. Ohio State hosted a shutout against Rutgers. They always typically play them pretty well. USC, I thought that would be a little bit closer, Jake, but they handled business. I got to watch that game, and that offense is so explosive, man.
Yeah.
The really one that obviously is me as a UW guy that was pretty shocking, but not really, because historically we always played really, really poorly in the Rose Bowl and against UCLA for some reason. But got to tip your hat to Chip Kelly and that UCLA offense and defense. They played a hell of a game against Washington. And the biggest thing that stood out for me in that game, Jake, and it wasn't no surprise to everybody that was watching, was the tackling for my Huskies. Historically, we've been a pretty solid tackling team, but I feel like sometimes, especially when you're on the road, Jake, you got to bring your A game, and they're tackling against a very mobile quarterback who was on fire that game. You got to be able to bring your A game and track in space and be calm and collected. So definitely got to clean that up. We want to get back to that top 15, top 12 mark. But yeah, everything else looked pretty good, man. I like Florida. They're kind of falling off a little bit. They took a L to Wake Forest, and also Pitt too as well. Lost a close one in Georgia Tech. So especially with them losing their head coach, I believe. I think Georgia Tech fired their head coach a couple weeks back. But overall, was pretty standard weekend for college football, but also some upsets and some things that definitely can shake it up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, you definitely see that right side of the screen. You see a lot of red, those teams losing. A few of those are, both ranked matchups. So you'll have obviously like Alabama, Arkansas, both top 25 teams, Baylor, Oklahoma, both top ranked teams. And so obviously someone's got to lose. So it makes this list look a little, uneven for that fact. But
yes.
Yeah, you alluded to with Washington, unfortunately going down like they did. I think, the first 4 games, that's the first game on the road for them. They beat Michigan State early, but I think we're seeing Michigan State's not quite the team everyone thought they were. I think Washington still has enough to bounce back. But again, going from some of those teams they played early on at home to go into now what seems to be a more explosive offense with UCLA, just led to those missed attempts and tackling and whatnot. And so, but I do expect them to bounce back. They're still not bounced out of the top 25, which is good to see.
Yes.
Which shows that team, the poll and the writers and everyone across the country still believes in what they're doing, the type of team they can be. Yeah. But that left side, like you said, pretty standard for what you'd expect. Obviously, the scare with Georgia, but I think things are going to start. We'll see here in a second, or let's get to it right now. Things kind of shaking up with the new top 25. With the first being, because of that scare, Alabama beats Arkansas, top 25 team. Georgia, shaky performance. They switch spots. So, that's the big one, the first notice. And then I'll let you point out the rest of it. But my other thing I like to notice on the right side of the screen, basically from UCLA at number 18 down to LSU at 25, with the exceptions of Kansas State and UW, who were previously ranked in the top 25, all newly ranked teams making it in. And, some of these I believe are, valid. And some of these I was actually kind of surprised. You see Syracuse in there, Cincy, Mississippi State, things like that. TCU goes from not ranked to 17.
Right. That was a big game, actually. Yeah. No, that's a great point, Jake. I think you definitely – that TCU performance versus Oklahoma, I mean, man, that offense was doing their thing. That quarterback that came in, he was moving. And historically, he's actually been really, really effective in that offense or in that style of offense. I know we have a new head coach with Coach Dykes over there, but still really poised, veteran quarterback. And you saw him. He was breaking off some big-time runs in that zone concept, and they weren't really expecting him to keep it, and he was turning the edge on them and going the distance. So I think that was promising, especially with that performance. With obviously Oklahoma is no slump, really well-coached team. And then UCLA, I think they did earn it. I know their first 4 wins were kind of iffy ones, but they did deserve that win last week. They earned it. I think they have a great veteran quarterback, a good system. Defense is flying around. They have some guys up front that looked the part. I know we have a transfer from UW that was there that had a couple sacks against us last week. But, yeah, definitely looking good. But everything on the left-hand side, like you mentioned, I do believe that's valid that Alabama does jump Georgia just based on the circumstances last week. But it's going to be a tough battle back and forth for the next, 5 to 6 weeks because of the schedules. And we talked about that a little bit last week, but we'll definitely see how everything kind of plays out in the next, 3 to 4 weeks there, Jake. But, yeah, USC right around the middle pack, but I think they're going to keep on creeping up and just maybe get to that 4th or 5th mark because you never know what Clemson or Michigan is going to do towards the end, right? They could definitely lose a couple or maybe one game that wasn't what they were supposed to, and that will be enough to tip, Lincoln Riley and the Trojans to top 5, top 4 teams. But, yeah, some good football to be played this weekend, so I'm going to be really, tuned into my TV and watching as much as I can.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do have a question for looking at this based on the performance last week, what we've seen, especially over the season so far. Ohio State and that offense is looking really good, right?
Yes.
You have Alabama has kind of the shaky performance against Texas. Georgia last week, shaky performance against Missouri. And so they're obviously at the top 2. They're in the strongest conference in the country. But if you see that kind of, season still shaking off or going that way the rest of the year and Ohio State stays in the way they're projecting, is there any chance by the end of the year, let's say they went out, let's see they beat Michigan, who's number 4 right now. Any chance at the end of the year you see them jumping Alabama and Georgia for that number 1 spot, or is the SEC conference too strong for them, not for one of those teams to stay number 1?
That's a very valid question, Jake, but I'm going to say no, just based on, like you just mentioned, the strength of schedule. The Big Ten, I'm not going to say it's completely down, but it's a little bit down, right? Besides, Penn State and Michigan, and that's about it, really, because Michigan State kind of got jumped out of there early in the season by the Dogs. But really, those two teams right there. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how it plays. I don't think so, unless it was like, Alabama or Georgia just really throws up a goose egg and Ohio State is just blowing guys out by 20 points for the rest of the season, then I definitely could see that happening. But it's going to be a tough uphill battle, I think, in that. But you never know, Jake. There's been crazier things to happen. So
for sure. Yep. Let's get into a few news things for the week. First being the state of Kansas football overall. Looking to be in a good spot. You've got now Kansas, who is 5-0 for the first time since 2009, jumping into the top 25 all the way up to number 20. Kansas State, number 21, 4-1 on the year. Obviously, had that big win against Oklahoma a few weeks ago. 2 teams that you wouldn't expect to kind of be on this trajectory. It's something noteworthy to point out, especially with Kansas, kind of, one of the lower level programs over the last few years trying to rebuild and seem to have gotten to the rebuilt where they need to be. Yeah,
no, I agree. It's pretty it's interesting to see Kansas known for their basketball over the last 10, 12 years, but it's good to see them have a resurgence in football, and they're doing their thing. And then Kansas State had a good performance against Texas Tech last week. That quarterback, I think he rushed for over 150 yards, and that they got that dynamic running back in the back end, number 22. So, yeah, I think definitely you can't sleep on both these teams. They're going to keep on playing well at a high level, and we'll see how it shakes out, Jake.
Yeah. Also in the news, we're getting more and more of this throughout the year, it seems like now, but one of the surprising ones of last week's Paul Chryst is out at Wisconsin. Obviously not the start that they're used to getting off to, struggling early on this year. But he's had a lot of success there over the years. And so I would say surprising for me that they made this move given the level of success that they've had with him at the helm, and just being probably a 1-year anomaly. Traditionally making it to Big Ten championship games and ranking the top 25 year in and year out. So, something that I think surprised the college football world.
No, I mean, tremendously. That guy's been, +8, at least over 500 for his whole, last 5 or 10 years there. So, I mean, they have a great offensive system in place where they want to run the ball. They have some really good running backs come through that program. So, aside from that, though, it's just really crazy. And I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic, Jake. I want to hear your thoughts on this, like the whole thought process in terms of firing coaches mid-season at the college level. I feel like it's becoming more of the norm. We saw it with Edwards and some other guys over the last couple of weeks, but I feel like that's kind of it's kind of a tough situation for the players and all the things in terms of the NIL and transfer portals here and nowadays. It's a little bit different, Jake. So what are your thoughts on like firing coaches so early in the season or like midway through the season?
Yeah, I think part of it is, or maybe a lot of it is in response to NIL right now, right? And that you don't, before you had to rely on recruiting and kind of years built on recruiting, and now, now you can basically, through NIL deals and boosters and whatnot, you can bring in players at a moment's notice, and so if the guy's not working out right away for what you like, bring in someone new who might attract those guys quicker, be able to build up a better group of players just based on bringing NIL deals and stuff like that. So I think that's part of it. I think in certain situations, it's in terms of state of the program, it may be necessary to kind of part ways before it goes down any further. When I was in school, I was only playing D3, so they really typically don't do the mid-season firings and stuff at the type of level that D1s do. But from my experience at my couple of years, it kind of went downhill with our program. So from that perspective, I can see something like that. But at the high level, you don't want the program to get too far in the gutter and try to make it even harder to build back up the next year or two. But with a situation like this, I would, I kind of disagree with that. I think if at least you got to let him stick out the rest of the year. Again, we're only about 5 or 6 games into it. Let's say he goes, wins the next 4 or 5 the rest of the year and goes still, is able to stay around that 500 and build up again. So I think a guy like this has earned the right to have, a year or two of rebuilding almost. I mean, we kind of see it. I think you see it more and more with first-year coaches and second-year coaches in the NFL, like with Pete Carroll this year, Seahawks, they're rebuilding year, quote unquote, and they're still giving extensions and stuff like that. I think in certain situations it's warranted. Situations like this though, where it's a historic program of success, this is just a one anomaly year. I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah, valid. I agree too. I think it's just kind of one of those things that really shakes up the whole dynamic in your locker room. But, with the money that's being poured into these universities now and the implications for that, everything's kind of fair game now. It's just unfortunate to see a guy that had a lot of success like most of these coaches have had. It's just sometimes it takes time to develop and build a program, especially when you're starting from scratch, or if you've had a lot of success and maybe you're just kind of getting your guys back and getting some new recruits kind of flowing in. It's going to take time. So I think right now we're just in a world where we want instant results. Yep. And that could be probably something that goes into these firings over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think those boosters and people in the program are expecting, instant gratification and results. And I think coaches are more pressure about that because now everyone knows, okay, we can get someone else new and we can just almost essentially, quote unquote, buy recruits and transfers to get here quicker based on the type of, team we want to see. So I think it's put a lot more pressure on coaches to win right away with what they're given. And you're kind of seeing that now at, like Texas A&M with him on the hot seat. So I think that's just going to be a trend that probably continues more and more until they kind of iron out more details on the NIL and stuff like that. So last story of the week. It's kind of interesting when I saw this via The Athletic, actually. It's a trend that's becoming more and more popular within college football, again, because of NIL, because of these and the transfer portal, these players being able to transfer more efficiently, which we've talked about the transfer portal in the past. It's more of a database and stuff like that. They still technically have to go through waivers to transfer and be eligible and stuff like that. But still, it makes that process more efficient. It's making it easier for players across the country to transfer. And one of those schools, notably this year, was USC. Getting the receiver from Pitt, getting quarterback from Oklahoma, getting the running back from Oregon, all in 1 year. The example here, though, in the story is the trend of players now opting to redshirt in season. And with the intent of transferring at the end of the year. The story here is with Gary Bryant Jr., the number one receiver last year at USC, yards, receptions, everything like that. New regime comes into USC, doesn't see any playing time. And in college, basically, if you play for less than a quarter of the year, so typically it's 3 games or less than 4, you're still eligible for a redshirt. So what you'll see, what we're seeing is players after 3 to 4 weeks not receiving any playing time, they opt for a red shirt if they still have one, and then they basically will get that year back. And at the end of the year, intend to enter the transfer portal in December when it opens up and move forward. I think this is, I've transferred multiple times in college, so I definitely see why people would do it if you were in a good situation and then things kind of falter. But this trend of now, I didn't have this opportunity, but to redshirt in season and gain a year back going forward, I think it's becoming more and more popular. Have you kind of noticed this as well?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it makes sense. I get it because, like you mentioned, a whole new system comes in. Really talented guy last year, but sometimes it's not the right fit for you. And there's guys that get transfer in, and they're the priority in terms of getting them the ball. There's only one ball on the field, right? As a running back, you know this, Jake. So for him, he's probably just thinking about, I got to get my money, quote unquote, and save my eligibility, save my ability to play next year and find the right system. But I somewhat agree with it. But also it's kind of one of those things that adversity and just being able to play through that, I still believe in that as well. Like if you're not getting play time, what can you do to change that? And sometimes I get it is out of the player's control. I understand that first and foremost, but a lot of these now it's more kind of self-inflicted, where it's just more, I don't want to really compete and stuff. I'm not saying it about this guy, but that tends to be the trend now, where you're not the starting guy, especially as a skilled player, like quarterback in particular, which again, I understand how that goes. It's just less turnover, but still want to try to play it out and kind of just do your best to put your best foot forward. And at the end of the day, if that doesn't work, then yes, I would obviously recommend you seeking other options, but sometimes you gotta let it play because it's a long season, so anything can happen, right, Jake?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I see the two sides of it. Being a transfer, I definitely see why these people want to do that. You want to go to the best situation that you can, where you're going to not only play, but feel good about where you're at,
right,
the program you're at, and stuff like that. So I'm never going to knock someone necessarily for something like that, wanting to do so. But I definitely see. I think there's a quicker, like we go back to what we said in the last piece, was that instant gratification, where
yes.
As soon as something bad goes wrong, people are very quick to just take, I don't want to say the easy way out, but take another option that's available to them before they try and problem solve, stick it out, persevere, things that you just kind of alluded to. So, I see that trend more and more happening as well. Why these people are doing it. It's an instant turnover, it seems like. So, all right, let's look real quick to this weekend. We got the top 25 schedule here. We're finally, again, week 2 or 3 into really conference play. Any of these stand out to you?
First off the bat, number 3, we got Ohio State versus Michigan State. Historically, those have been pretty fun, interesting games and close and competitive. So I'll look out for that one, Jake. Obviously, you got to look at Washington State. They're playing at a pretty good level, man. They got that linebacker over there. So they're playing some defense. They're playing complementary football on offense, all three phases. So you never know. So Washington State has been in some games over the last couple of weeks that maybe they could learn from those and maybe pull out a victory against USC, though. I'm a little reluctant to say that because I'm a dog, but I call it as I see it, right, Jake?
Yep.
I think Arizona versus Oregon, that's going to be probably a pretty high-scoring game, just based on what I saw last week from Arizona and that offense, that transfer from Washington State. The quarterback, he likes to sling it around, but also he's very mobile. So I think that could be a pretty fun, exciting game. Heading over to the right side, I'm definitely going to be tuning into the BYU Notre Dame game. Probably not the most exciting game, but I want to see how Notre Dame kind of bounced back in terms of a bigger name school like BYU, and how BYU's kind of stirring it up a little bit. I want to see that kind of two historic programs go head to head. I think that'd be fun. And UCLA versus Utah, that's going to be a big one, right? Be seeing if UCLA can go back to back with two of the bigger, juggernauts in the conference. And then lastly, I would say Cincinnati versus USF. Excuse me. I think that would be a pretty fun game to watch. But overall, a lot of good football to be played on Saturday.
Yep, no, I agree. I think we see a lot of the same games. For me, it's USC is probably on upset alert. They had the scare against Oregon State, and then you have Washington State, who, earlier in the year upsets Wisconsin. They should have were very close to upsetting Oregon, and so they're consistently playing well. I can see this happening again here. And on the right side, I see a list of teams, like you said. I think a few games that each of these teams within them have something to prove that they belong. And so TCU, Kansas, both first time in top 25. Let's see how good they are. If they're deserve to be here. The other one, UCLA, Utah, you alluded to. I think Utah has a lot to prove along with UCLA, solidifying their spot. And then LSU, Tennessee, right? I think Tennessee's kind of on that hot streak coming off a bye. LSU is going to be probably always LSU, though still a tough opponent to play, but just cracking the top 25 again. So let's see if Tennessee and that quarterback's for real, or let's see if LSU is starting to get back to their old ways a little bit and being a strong opponent in the SEC again.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, let's shift gears now to the NFL. We're going inside the league. Let's recap the previous week's games from week 4. Obviously we had the Thursday night game, which I think we touched on last week, Dolphins and Bengals. We had the overseas game, Vikings and Saints. That last play, that double doink kick off the goalpost for New Orleans. I think the other ones to point out here for me, Bills making a huge comeback against the Ravens. These last 2 weeks, you've seen that offense kind of struggle a little bit, which is interesting because they got off to such a hot start. Chargers finally getting back on the wagon with that win over the Texans. Giants improving to 3-1. Again, we'll get into this, but are they legit? Are they a legit contender for the NFC East? I think that the division is doing well right now.
Yes.
Let's see what else we got here. Broncos, Raiders. That again we're going to allude to in a little bit, but that division itself is actually kind of looking the opposite of what everyone expected this year. And then you have your Chiefs and Buccaneers. That highly contested matchup that we were expecting finally from two top level quarterbacks, and then we'll hit on our two teams. I'll start with my Seahawks on a shootout with the Lions. Offense looking great. That Lions defense obviously is not one of the best, neither is ours. But finally getting Penny going, finally getting DK going. One of the stats I'm going to throw out there is Geno, as of right now, is outperforming Russell Wilson. To many people's surprise. Even I'm surprised at that at this point in the year, but it's great to see. So I think we still have a lot of holes to fix. Obviously, defense still not performing to where we need them to be competitive down the year. But it was good to see the offense get going because we did have a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks. So, but your Niners handling the Rams struggling this year, but your Niners are quickly, on the rise. And I think this week as well, going into this week, they're getting a few people back on the defense, which is already starting to perform at another level, which you'll talk about later as well. But what's your take on your Niners this past week?
Well, yeah, we'll start with the Niners. The most, Monday Night Football. For some reason, Jimmy G always follows up a mediocre performance with a good performance and helps the team win. And he also really plays really well against the Rams last couple years. So that was a great game. And we'll talk more about the defense. But how about, guys like Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, you got guys like Mosley and Ward on the outside. I mean, this defense is somehow taken to another level that as a Niner fan, I'm very happy to see, because we definitely need our defense to kind of carry us a little bit this year. But I think we're playing, I say a lot, it's a cliche, but complementary football, and that's going to be big for my Niners the rest of the season.
No, absolutely. So it's shaping up to be an interesting division so far for us in particular. Let's see. Injury news. Let's get into some news for the week, starting with the injuries. Obviously, Tua, there's a lot of the controversy over the last couple of weeks. He's officially ruled out. I think he's going to be out for a lot longer than just they only discussed and referenced this week, but I think it's going to be a lot longer than that. Daniel Jones just this morning removed from the injury report. Had that ankle injury last week. Tom Brady looks like he's going to play. He's on the injury report with the shoulder. Jonathan Taylor obviously missed last night with that ankle injury. From last week, Javonte Williams ACL out for the year. That's hard for them. That's tough. He's a great player. And it sounds like it's a pretty significant injury, not just ACL, but it sounds like there's a lot more that happened with that knee. Cordell Patterson goes on IR with a knee issue. Alvin Kamara misses last week at the last minute with that ribs injury across the pond, but it looks like this week he's probable. Wants to be back, says he feels good to be back. And no offense to my Seahawks, but it's not a bad team to pick to be back on. We have a lot of holes in our defense right now, so hopefully we'll be able to shore up and stop him. But Brian Robinson from the Commanders, great news here. Finally returned to practice this week after that gun wound and gunshot incident shooting prior to the year. So great to see that back. Traylon Burks gets turf toe. Sounds like he's going to be out for multiple weeks. Just as he was kind of getting rolling, that looks like that team was kind of getting rolling, figuring out their footing a little bit. I had turf toe once, and I definitely know it's not easy to play through. So legit injury right there. Kyle Pitts, hamstring, probably questionable maybe. And lastly, missed last night. And a few more weeks to come. Randy Gregory with a knee injury as well.
Yeah. Part of the game, the injuries, and some of these stand out more than the others. I'm glad to first see that Daniel Jones is going to be able to play over in London. That's going to be a big primetime matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, and they're definitely going to need him. Just that combination with Saquon and him on the ground more than in the air is very, very important and critical to what they want to do over in New York. So I'm glad that he's somewhat healthy. We'll see how kind of develops, and things can happen during the course of a game, and that ankle stiffens up on you. It could affect it, but definitely a good option to have out there versus their backups. Tom Brady, he's going to look like he's going to play. I didn't really doubt that too much. We saw last night the implications of Jonathan Taylor being out, what it did for that. I mean, they still got the win, but the calls, they definitely had to earn that the hard way. And we talked more about that earlier. But, yeah, definitely a tough game to watch, especially as a running back enthusiast. You probably weren't happy to watch that one. Javonte Williams, as you mentioned, that's a tough one because there's more. It looks like it's a little bit more than an ACL or some other things that happen with the ligaments and the structure of his knee. So, I'm hoping that he has a speedy recovery and everything, looks good with him. And then, we mentioned Burks and Kyle Pitts, two young players that are going to be struggling with injuries a little bit. I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to play from what I'm hearing. He's had a slow start to the season, so definitely don't want to see that. Overall, hopefully these teams can kind of overcome these injuries and next man up mentality, Jake.
Yep, no, it's looking more and more like that each week within the NFL, and which is something we'll hit on a little bit later too. But outside of injuries, a slower week regarding news, but the big one in Pittsburgh, obviously he came in for Trubisky last week, but finally set to make his first NFL start Kenny Pickett. Hopefully he can revitalize that offense a little bit. It's been off to a slow start themselves. Not an easy matchup for him. First start against the Bills. Not the easiest defense to make your first start, but we'll see what happens. What do you think about him finally getting pushed into the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. Tomlin's he's not naive to this. I know he doesn't want to mess up that chance of keeping that over 500 win streak going. So the offense was struggling. The fans were not happy. The defense was not happy. The receivers weren't happy. Trubisky, he's had his success in the league at times, but let's just keep it real. He's definitely more of a backup quarterback at this phase and the standpoint of his career. So you invested in Pickens, and the guy can ball. He's a Pittsburgh kid, so the fans are going to rally around him, and there's going to be some lumps and some growing pains that are going to come with it. He's experiencing your first start against the Buffalo Bills, but he also came out in the media, I think, and said he's not scared of the Buffalo Bills, and that he feels very confident in their capability and his ability to lead this team. So we'll see how it plays out. He definitely had a couple air throws last week, but also he got into the end zone twice on the ground. And what was most important, what I'm hearing around, is that he kind of gave him a shock of energy. Yep. That they didn't have before, and they rallied around him. And they loved his confidence and poise in the huddle. So that goes a long way for a young quarterback, and they'll kind of take the learning pains that come with it. But I'm very excited to see how he performs being a top quarterback in this last draft.
No, absolutely. So finally, one of those first rookie quarterbacks seeing their action for the first time consistently this year. Other news, retirement news: Cole Beasley and Blake Bortles announcing this week both are retiring. Obviously, Cole Beasley lately just with the Buccaneers last couple weeks, but finally decided to retire after his career. With the Cowboys, the Bills, Bucks, good solid career as a slot. And then Blake Bortles, bounced around a couple teams the last few years, but obviously known for higher draft pick back with the Jaguars in the day, leading him ultimately to that one stellar year with the AFC Championship run that they made. But again, two, I think, solid careers, nothing obviously not stars within the league, but definitely had their years of success throughout. And so good to see them hang on a good note.
Yeah, for sure, Jake.
Last bit of news, again, like I said, pretty slow, but we're going to keep more and more up to date on this, especially Scott and I being the uniform and drip enthusiasts that we are. Couple ones. Also, we had a few last week, which if you go see in our social media channels, that we ended up ranking the 4 uniform combos alternate uniform combos from last week. This week, it looks like we're getting 2 new ones again, finally making their debuts. We have the Cardinals all black helmets going with the all blackout uniforms. And then we also have the New England Patriots red and white throwbacks. What do you think about these 2 themselves? And I'll give you my thoughts in a sec, but I'm interested to see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, the black on black is nice. Don't get me wrong. It's a good little subtle touch for the Arizona Cardinals, but I'm really looking at those New England Patriots uniforms. I remember those from the Madden days back in the days. Right. We used to always wear those ones. And those ones, I love the blue. I love the red. The white helmets is a very clean jersey, Jake. So I'm excited to see how those pop on the TV screen. It's going to be exciting for the fans to see that over in New England.
No, I agree with you on that too. I like the Cardinals helmet. I think it goes well with the all black unis, but the trend we saw is, early in the year when they started, everyone started releasing the new alternate helmets for this year. There's at least 5 to 7 or 8 all black helmets among the teams that were released. So it's not very original at this point. I think they do have a little bit of kind of like that red flake or sparkle within the helmet that makes it a little unique compared to the others. But at the end of the day, it looks clean, looks good. But yeah, it's just an all black helmet. Nothing too special. We saw it last week with New Orleans. We'll see it with, I believe it's the Jets at some point this year. We'll see it with the Eagles again at some point this year. We'll see it with the Panthers. Good trend, but I'm looking forward to the Patriots uniforms more so.
Yeah.
Let's look real quickly at this upcoming weekend. We had the underwhelming game last night of the Colts and Broncos. All field goals. Not a lot of offense, obviously. Taylor being out for the Colts, but Russ again not really living up to expectations in Denver. And as that last play of the game for him, kind of making news on social media, and rightly so. But I definitely see a couple interesting matchups going into this weekend. Giants, Packers overseas. Giants 3-1. Let's see if they can keep it going for them. Steelers and Bills. We mentioned Kenny Pickett's first start. Texans and Jaguars actually is interesting within their division. Both teams being a little more competitive this year. Interested to see where that goes. Dolphins and Jets first game with Bridgewater fully at quarterback. We'll see if they're able to continue their success and build off their 3-1 start. Luckily, it comes against a down team a little bit in New York as well. Eagles Cardinals could be an interesting game, and I think the other big ones are those last two, or last few actually. Is before we get to our teams, is the Cowboys and Rams, right? See if Rams can pick it up against what actually seems like a relatively strong Cowboys team this year. Bengals and the Ravens, two kind of mid-tier good teams, but kind of struggling a little bit from time to time, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And then Raiders and Chiefs, what's supposedly supposed to be that great division. Not looking like it quite yet, but give me your take, and then give me your take on you guys' matchup, the Niners with the Panthers.
Yeah. So first off, let's talk about last night's game. Let's get fully out the door. Definitely not a fan favorite last night. And, it's tough. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that Thursday Night Football is the best idea because it's a quick turnaround. Guys' bodies still need time to recover. It's very taxing on the body. But let's just talk about what actually happened. Just the offensive output in both of those games. They're down a bunch of players, but still, you still have talent on both those sides that should be able to at least score a couple touchdowns, make it a little bit more of it. And you have some offensive-minded coaches too as well that historically have been known to help, be quarterback whisperers or be able to be, pretty good play callers. So I'm not really buying into all that background, but let's just talk about the last final drives from both teams. I think the Colts did a great job of even getting it to overtime by Matt Ryan finally coming to life, hitting that young receiver a couple times over the middle on the sideline. Pierce, I believe his name is. So he had a great game. And then the Broncos trying to come back in overtime, I think with the new rules, right, they had an opportunity to maybe kick a field goal and at least keep the game going. But they opt to go for it. Now, you look back at week one and you talk about the decision to kick that 64-yard field goal over in Seattle or over here. And the coach got a lot of backlash for that. And also did Russell Wilson in terms of like, do you really trust this guy? So I think that was kind of the back of everyone's mind. Like, hey, we're at home. Crowd is booing us. We need to make a statement. We need to go for the win. But you think about like, if you don't get that, which didn't happen, how bad the implications of that. And sometimes, you roll with the punches and you take what comes with it. But just based on how their season has gone, I believe you got to just play for the win or at least the tie at that point. Tie, you never know what can happen. Your defense could, based on that game, your defense could have forced a turnover. You kick a field goal early and you win the game within, the last minutes of the game. Who knows? But you just, on that play, I don't like how they ran the ball, the decision-making to run the ball 3 times. And then you're 4th and 1, and now you're going to decide to pass after you didn't have a play that was in. You got to call a timeout a couple times. You let the offense and the defense kind of get out of the game, but also kind of, show their hand in a sense, and it didn't work for them. And then at the end of the day, Russ has to make the play. We saw how Hamler was wide open, and maybe there's a little bit of PSD from the Super Bowl. But, yeah, the optics of that and what's going on in Denver in particular is definitely concerning. So I had to get that off my chest. That was kind of my deep analysis of the game. But, it was odd matchup last night.
No, for sure. And I think everyone's going to examine Hackett right now. And I agree with you how they should have handled last night. You see, in week 1 against Seattle, they opt for all the time run off the clock. They opt for that field goal. Obviously they had McManus back there, but that's a 64. I think the situations are different. That's a 64 or roughly 60 to 64 yard field goal that's not a gimme by any means. And so they opt for what's not a gimme. And then in this situation, what would have tied the game is more of a gimme in terms of field goal. They opt not to do, and they go for the harder option again as well, and trying to pass it on a night when both you're struggling on offense and, like you said, run the ball, 4th and 1. What do we do? Pass with kind of a don't have a set play ready to go. I think there's just a lot of things happening out right now with Denver, not operating very well from all aspects. I agree with you 100% on what you saw in your analysis. I just think there's too much talent, especially Colts side. There's too much talent on the side of the field. Fantasy-wise, I played Michael Pittman last night, expecting Jonathan Taylor's out, right?
Yeah.
I know Denver has a good defense to Surtain over there, but they got to throw the ball to somebody with Matt Ryan and Pittman being healthy again finally. Throw it to him. Still didn't see the production that we wanted to see from him or the team in general. And, so, I think there's a lot of things we see in the league right now that need to be reworked, especially. And last night just kind of was a culmination of all of that.
Validated, yeah. Real quickly, we'll talk about the matchups I like too. Is we talked about it, the Steelers and the Bills. Excited to watch that. Justin Jefferson came back to life last week in London, so him against a pretty young defensive backfield in the Bears. They have a pretty good defense, but I think Cousins and Jefferson, that offense can get it going against the Bears and have a pretty good showing. Then also we have the Niners playing the Panthers. I'm going to be watching that one, see how that goes. Pretty favorable matchup in terms of our defense and their offense, but we got to, the Panthers are going to be hungry and eager to, show up at home and get the fans off their back and off their coaches' back potentially. So you never know, but I think the Niners have a really good favorable matchup in terms of what they do on defense and what the offense want to do on offense, what the Panthers want to do on offense, excuse me. And then lastly, the last 3 games are going to be great. Rams and the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense is playing at an elite level. Probably one of the top defenses in the league. They got Parsons. They got Diggs in the back end. Safeties are flying around. Everyone's just doing a great job on defense. And you got Cooper Rush at quarterback kind of stirring up the pot when it comes to
controversy over there now.
Yeah, but, we'll talk more about that probably in the future. But I think he's just doing a great job of not managing the game, but not doing things to lose a game. He's playing good. Don't get me wrong. He's definitely making some good throws. He's not turning the ball over, and they're just winning. So at the end of the day, you cannot knock him for that. And the Rams, we saw on Monday, they struggle with a pass rush. And also, let's see if Stafford can not force the ball, but look for other weapons versus this Kupp and Higbee, because he has some guys out there that can win, and maybe running the ball too can kind of soften up that front a little bit and kind of create some deception and help that play action kind of open up, which Stafford is really good at, right, Jake? And then Bengals Ravens, that's going to be a great game on Sunday night. Talk about kind of the backlash that Harbaugh got for that, passing up that field goal, right? You got one of the best, if not the best kicker in history with Tucker. And, I understand we're analytics guys, so we know, but sometimes it's based on your past couple of years, you've been a little bit aggressive, and I love that he trusts his players, but it hasn't always worked out for him. I don't think it's worked out in his favor. So you would think that he would kind of learn from that and just kind of take the points. And he talked about, not wanting to put, what's his name, on the field, Josh Allen back on the field with, leaving it up to him to win the game. But I think their defense wasn't playing the best, but you never know. You can they have some names and some dudes on that defensive end that could have made a play and you could have won the game. So we'll see how they bounce back. The Bengals and the Ravens always are great TV. And then Monday night, I'm going to be tuning into that one. I got a bunch of guys on fantasy playing in both of those teams. So I'm going to be tuned into that one. But I'm going to look for some really good offensive games, hopefully. I know the Chiefs are going to have a pretty good performance, but I'm also looking at the Raiders with the weapons they have and being able to get the win last week. I hope that they can kind of, kind of keep that momentum going and make for a really good Monday Night Football.
Yeah, no, that should be a good one. To touch on my Seahawks real quick, I forgot to mention them. Playing the Saints, I think we have a shot. I think, in terms of wide receiver core for New Orleans, Chris Olave is really becoming a star for that team. But Thomas sounds like he's going to be out. You got Landry, who's not really a focal point anymore, kind of banged up. Kamara coming off injury, and Jameis sounds like he'll be back, but again, coming off injury again. Our defense it's going to be tough to stop them, but I think from what we saw from our offense last week, New Orleans isn't quite looking on defense what we all expected them to be. Still a very strong defense, no doubt, but I think we have enough to at least be competitive. I don't know if we win this game. I think New Orleans might have too many weapons on both sides of the ball to overcome that, yes. But hopefully we can fix a few holes from last week and learn. But at least in a shootout, we've proven we can probably hang with those kind of teams a little bit. But we'll see. A tough matchup for sure. All right, let's finally transition into our main topic. Scott and I each have a few points on this, but the NFL regular season's preseason, we're calling it. And what we mean by that is nowadays, these stars and these teams don't really play and show their full hand in preseason, right? You get a lot of players now not even playing a single down in the preseason. It used to be they'd play, build up, game 1, 2, and 3 to play more and more, and then either sit out that last game or only play a half and sit out, right? But now we're seeing players not even play at all in the preseason. I think, I know the Seahawks on defense had 3 or 4, maybe 5 players that didn't see one snap almost in the preseason. Teams are afraid of getting hurt. But I think because of that, what happens now in weeks 1 through 4 in the NFL, the regular season, is we see teams now having to make adjustments, kind of find their footing, kind of figure things out. And so, this has been a point of topic as well, and we'll get into it, but a little bit of sloppy play, a little bit of teams underperforming what we expected and whatnot. And so this is really the preseason of teams trying to catch their footing, figure things out, and get on track. And then the remaining weeks of the year is when, the real football almost is starting to take off. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've got a few points, and I'll get us started. Scott has his own points. But the first will be for me is that these new look teams and these new look systems, a lot of them, not all of them, I think some are still working out, are still trying to find their footing. You have teams like the Chiefs that obviously lose Tyreek are doing well, right? But I think a lot of teams, most notably is Denver right now, with Russell Wilson expecting to be his high-powered offense, not what people expected. Baker comes into Carolina, what seems like a better QB option than what they had in the past, underperforming once again. You see that with the Colts right now. You see that obviously with the Raiders. You see that with, in my opinion, the Seahawks defense underperforming for what we expected, the Saints defense to an extent. And then, like the Bengals, these are just the examples of, Bengals redo that offensive line, expect to be better and build off that Super Bowl appearance from last year. Underwhelming kind of once again and still have those O-line issues. So, again, I think all these teams waiting to play their players and really implement them system up, not until the regular season, we're starting to see that they are still trying to figure things out on the run versus getting that stuff taken care of in the actual preseason. But Scott, I'm interested to see if you agree with, especially like my team examples, or if you see this kind of playing out the same way right now.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, Jake. With anything, it takes time, especially developing a system and a structure in place with a new coach or a new quarterback or new weapons around you. All is game. And I think you're seeing with all these teams, I would actually see besides, let's just start with the Seahawks. Let's just keep it 100. I think that the offense is playing at actually a really good level, given everything. I know they kind of struggled against the Niners and the week previously, the last week, but overall, Geno has done his job. You saw them rely on the run game a little bit more with Penny, and that really helped open things up. But yeah, can they keep that going? But also their defense, they got to keep on working on that because, that was like a college football high school score last week. The points were just going up. And I think if you're a fantasy guy, that's probably pretty fun. But yeah, no, definitely want to kind of monitor the defensive scheme that they're working on and kind of getting the pieces around them to be able to play the run better and also limit those explosive plays overall in general. We already talked about Denver, new quarterback, new coach. That definitely is going to be a little bit different of a dynamic. With guys over in Carolina, you have a new quarterback that has the weapons, has a good defense, but what's the issue there? Is it the play calling? What is it? We don't know. There's a lot of things that can go into that. But you would like to think that Baker, top draft pick, can turn it around with the weapons you have. I mean, you have a great running back, still great, I believe. Even I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think McCaffrey, regardless of how you utilize him, he still has a very unique skill set that they can probably lean on a little bit more when your quarterback is struggling. Couple quick screens to McCaffrey, a couple runs back to back. I know durability has been a thing, but at this point, you let him kind of go, and I think he's ready to do it. I think he's worked on his body, and he'll be fine. And then what I do really trust in is the David Carr and Devontae Adams kind of connection. I mean, it goes all the way back to Fresno State. They've had a lot of success. I believe McDaniels. I know it's a little bit different, but it's not what's going on in Denver. I mean, his is more of getting a rhythm with the quarterback and also the protection there as well. This got to get on the same page, and I think that can definitely happen. It probably could have happened if you do it in preseason, but like we mentioned, that's not the case in the NFL. You don't have that luxury. So these first 4 weeks, that's how you build that. And I think now they're going to kind of hit their stride. You saw it last week. They got Javonte a little bit more engaged, had a couple little jet sweeps. They had a pretty tough matchup with the Broncos secondary, and he still had a really solid game. But I think there's still things left on the board that they want to clean up and, potentially make some bigger plays. It's going to be a tough matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, but I mean, historically, it's been a really high scoring matchup and really good football. Dennis Allen, have a lot of respect for him over in New Orleans. They've had a lot of injuries and a lot of bad fortune come their way, but they still have the pieces on to keep them afloat. If they can get the offense going with Kamara and hopefully get Winston back, that's fine. But still, Andy Dalton he's not a slouch. He's a proven veteran, and I think they'll be fine as long as they keep everyone intact. And then the Bengals, same thing. They shore up the protection with Burrows. He's going to be solid, but they have another tough matchup with a really good front and also an angry defense after last week. You saw Marcus Peters, my boy, my fellow dog, going back and forth with the coach on the sideline after. And that's just kind of one of those things that sometimes that helps. In a case like that, you got to look at the silver lining, and maybe that motivates the defense to come out and play really good in primetime football, Jake.
Yep, no, agreed. All right, Scott, you got our next talking point here. Your Niners. Kind of a little up and down to start the year, but definitely now on the upward swing. So
I mean, it's really interesting what a 1 week or 2 weeks can do. So it makes a world of difference. I would say their worst performance is the second half of the first game, the Bears game over in the monsoon. But every other quarter from there has been pretty damn good football from a defensive perspective. But you have to remember that complementary football, I keep on talking about it. If the offense can just put up points, but also keep the defense off the field and let them, get their rest and do all that, keep that front four that they have a lot of guys they can rotate fresh, that just helps them, because you saw what happened on Monday when they have bodies rotating in, and they were still missing Javon Kinlaw last week, and I think they're going to miss him this weekend. And Eric Armstead also, he did miss the rest of the second half, but he's kind of the key that unlocks that whole defensive line because he gets great push in the middle, and also he's long and lengthy where he can create some havoc on the run game as well. So people don't really think too much about that. But the thing that they have is depth, Jake, and that's kind of been a common denominator for them over the last couple years, and they've been a really good defense since 2018, 19, definitely. But now you see guys like Nick Bosa. He's looking to make a case for defensive player of the NFL. He's leading the league in sacks. also in hurries and QB pressures. He's doing it all. He's first in everything. That guy, he's a beast, man. He looks the part, but also he plays. He's relentless. He plays a run to pass. I mean, I don't want to talk too much, but then you got guys in the second level like Greenlaw. I mean, talk about that guy. I think he had about 14 tackles last week. That guy was flying around, had some really good tackles out in space, and I love his intensity that he plays with. Sometimes he kind of gets him in trouble with the penalties, but that's part of the game that he can kind of clean up for sure. And you got Fred Warner kind of being the general in the middle, directing the defense and doing a great job in coverage, but also in the blitz game. But the most important thing, Jake, is the back end of the defense, which sometimes outside of Richard Sherman those years, we didn't really have a true lockdown corner. And I think Ward, he's doing a great job. I mean, he's lengthy, but also he's kind of under the radar in Kansas City. But he was a really kind of savvy pickup in free agency that the Niners are really paying the benefits of, because when you have a lockdown corner like that, but also Mosley on the outside, who's playing great coverage, but also can tackle, both the corners tackle really well. And then my last thing I want to talk about, or two more things, is our guy Hufanga. I mean, that guy, going back to USC, I got to watch him during the COVID year, and when they had like a condensed season, and number 15 just kept on popping up on, I think they're playing Arizona State. I was watching that game, and I was like, man, this dude had like 2 forced fumbles, an interception. He plays by the line of scrimmage, but also he's doing really good in coverage. And I think that was his knock, was his whole, his coverage element, and would it be able to translate over to the NFL? And last year, he didn't really have to play that much, but this year you're seeing him do it at all levels, where he's in the run game. He's playing the pass really well. Saw that pick 6 against Stafford. So I love that. And don't forget to mention they get Jimmy Ward and Barrett back. So we don't know if they're going to play this week, but those are 2 vets that are really going to help that defense even more.
Yeah, no, I mean, this team has been on a journey already through the first 4 weeks, right? Preseason, everyone kind of sees them as a Super Bowl contender, and then you have the drama with Deebo Samuel, and then obviously early on in week 2, Trey Lance goes down, and you have in week 1, Elijah Mitchell goes down. The offense is looking skeptical, and you lose those guys on defense as well. Can they hold up, right? And then all of a sudden we see this defense is really performing at a high level, keeping them in the game. With the guys you mentioned, and you get more guys back that are now, went from season possibly being over after week 2 to now being talked again, once again as a Super Bowl contender, because largely that defensive performance and those guys that you guys mentioned, along with even more guys coming back. So I agree with you. They are really performing at a high level. That excellent performance last week against the Rams. And a bit of a side story that I found out a few weeks ago from my boy Grant, my former quarterback down in college at George Fox. He is from Corvallis, Oregon. Played in high school down there, and actually Hufanga, again, a few years younger than us, right? Was actually the ball boy for his high school team when he played. Wow! So there's a small world of how those connections happen. So
yeah.
Kind of interesting to find that out, because
that's
obviously
funny.
He's making a small scene for himself right now, really being that X factor for that defense and kind of taking the league by storm. So
taking the league by storm. He's getting a lot of hype, Jake. And the one thing I don't like is the comparison to Palomalu, who's like an all-time great safety. And I get the comparison because they work out together, their family and the USC and all that. But we kind of got to let these players like be themselves too, right, Jake? I mean, sometimes we get caught up in the whole comparisons and all that, but they're 2 different players in a sense. I mean, you got to watch. If you really look back and look at what Troy did, they're a little bit different. Similar style of play, but they do things differently. But all in all, I'm very, very happy to have him. He's a game changer in the back end and really fun to watch. So, I mean, it makes for really exciting football on the defensive end, like a defensive enthusiast like myself. I mean, that's some good football they're playing. I'm really excited to see how they perform against the Panthers this week.
Mm-hmm. The next topic I want to bring up, me being now the offensive side, a running back enthusiast myself, playing the position. is that we've seen really a lack of performance from that running back spot. Anyone who plays fantasy definitely knows that this year, because all of our top picks, everyone takes a running back in the first round, takes 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds sometimes, are not performing as we expected. Guys like Jonathan Taylor, CMC, Dalvin Cook, Henry getting off to a slow start. These guys not performing at the level that we all expected. And I think there's actually a couple reasons for that. The first that I don't think is the reason for that is the lack of talent, right? I think we definitely see, obviously, Jonathan Taylor's only in year 3 or 4. That age gap isn't hitting him. That age factor wouldn't be a thing for him. Saquon has the talent. Chubb has the talent. CMC, Kamara, Henry, Taylor, Cook, they all have the talent, right? So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's a lack of value in the position that way that we're seeing a style of play or lack of play because of the talent that's out there. I think every team has a really good back right now that's very talented. So I don't think that's the issue. I think the 2 main issues we come into, one, which is going to lead into my next topic here in a second, but is the injuries, right? Already we've seen, Kamara missed 2 games with injuries. Taylor out last night. You see guys like Dalvin Cook exiting the game last week with shoulder injuries, and you guys like Elijah Mitchell, David Montgomery. Like, the list can kind of go on and on. If I'm looking at my list right now, as I go down it, there's just lots of players that have had lots of injuries. Javonte Williams is now out, right? DeAndre Swift missed last week and maybe this week with a shoulder and a couple injuries. All these things are kind of factors right now, injury-wise, why this lack of performance, which is a thing, all right? I mean, especially for running backs, as certain ones get older, like we're seeing with Ezekiel Elliott right now, not quite the player he was a few years ago. I think, obviously, those are going to contribute to lack of play. But I think the other thing that's going on, that the main thing in my eyes, is the style of offenses and the lack of usage, right, for the most part, or the way they're using them. Obviously certain guys like, Taylor's not performing as well right now. That's, some O-line issues, and he's getting touches and things like that. But obviously it's that Tennessee offense struggle early on in the year, and that's not going to help Henry's performance. CMC, he's getting a decent amount of carries, right? But he's not getting nearly the touches in the passing game that we expected, which is the type of player he is. That's what him and Kamara are known for, is get those, not only those those rushes in a game, but get those pass catches and get that yak, especially after that. And so I think the lack of usage is also why we're seeing a kind of a lack of performance in the running back position right now. So I think we're starting to see it pick up. Saquon is back, right? He's continuously performing at a high level. Nick Chubb on the ground is solid. Henry's starting to pick it up a little bit. Hopefully, Kamara will start to kind of get back on track and things. And we're seeing, Austin Eckler last week getting back on track with things like that. So I think we're going to start to see it probably come back into the fold. Like I said, that this first 4 weeks, teams are just trying to figure things out. Maybe they're testing things out. And, teams that have, especially have the players that I have on the screen right now, these are legit all pro players. So once they start, I think, getting back to their roots and start using these guys more how they need to be used, I think we'll see that performance kind of go back on the upswing. But for right now, this is the way I see it, is that there is a lack of performance, but I don't think it's from lack of talent. I think it's from those other 2 factors that I mentioned.
Yeah, no, really good points, Jake. And real quickly, I want to talk about these guys, but also propose a question to you. So first off, let's talk about the good. I think Nick Chubb and Barkley are doing their thing, both being utilized really well. And we kind of know what Nick Chubb has been. But also when you have Kareem Hunt over there, it kind of makes an interesting dynamic. But he's still been able to still get his touches and be pretty damn productive. Saquon's a whole different thing, because we saw that rookie year, and we see what he can be and the potential. But it's the injuries have held him back. But now he looks fully healthy, and he's being a real focal point for that offense. Now, the not so good, right, is everyone else pretty much on this list, whether it be injuries or the way they're utilized. Like, for example, we talk about Dalvin Cook. He's really been successful at what? Inside zone, outside zone, both of those actually, but also the screen game. He has not been used like that, and that could be just the new coach coming in, but also the scheme and everything going in. Tony Pollard over in Dallas, that's going to cut into Zeke's touches, but we saw kind of Zeke kind of taper off in terms of explosiveness, but still he's a productive guy in the goal line, short yardage. He still can go, so let's not get it twisted. And then Derrick Henry has picked it up in the last couple of weeks, right, Jake? But still, coming back from that foot injury, it's going to be tough to get your grounding, which leads me to my next question. My question for you is a running back guy, and don't be biased. I know you're not going to be, but do you feel that running backs are more, instead of like a premium position, they're more, so premium, I mean like got things you have to have, obviously, like quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, maybe a corner you can think about, or are they more of a luxury? Like if you have a good one, you're really good, but are they interchangeable in terms like almost like a 49ers where you see Kyle Shanahan, he doesn't really invest in running backs too much. They have drafted some guys, but they're pretty interchangeable throughout his system. Do you feel like that's kind of a valid question, or do you feel like no, running backs still deserve the big contracts and they still deserve all the love that they used to get back in about even 5 to 10 years ago?
Yeah, so I think they are still a premium position. I think the way the game is shaped up today, I don't see them as the number one premium or above receivers, unfortunately, even though I am a running back. But I don't think necessarily on across the board. A generalization. Obviously, there are teams in the past. You see teams like the Patriots, and you see teams like the Niners with Shanahan that can make it work effectively, right? But if I look right now at these teams, there's only, you look at the CMC, Kamara, Taylor, Henry, right, Cook, very talented players, but like I said, lack of performance not being utilized. And how are those teams doing right now? Most of them are around that 2-2 or 1-win dynamic, right? You see, Barkley getting the use, they're 3-1. Things like that. I'm trying to look through my list right now and see what else I have. But Najee Harris, another example that I didn't mention yet, but his lack of usage right now, obviously, Steelers aren't performing up to their level as well. And you see, Montgomery goes down for Chicago and things like that, right? I do think that they are an important thing to have. I think when it comes to luxury would be is when you have someone like Cook and you have Madison as a backup, or you have Zeke and you have Pollard as a backup. Because obviously, as a running back, you can't, in the game that we have today, you can't play every down, every snap, and expect to probably stay healthy throughout the year. So I think that almost that second running back is the luxury spot that helps take the team to the next level. You see it with the Browns kind of from time to time with Chubb and their backup as well, Kareem Hunt. So, but I do think it's still a premium position that you really have to have a bell cow. And I think if you look at the majority of the teams, and I'm looking at my list right now, Henry, Taylor, Chubb, Cook, Elliott, Kamara, Mixon, Eckler, Harris, McCaffrey. You had Javonte Williams, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins. Even though he's out, Elijah Mitchell, right? Like when they're in there, they do make a difference, versus the guys that they have behind are just going running back by committee. So I do think for that reason they're premium. They're not seeing a premium in terms of how much is contracts and stuff like that. But again, there's only really one of them on the field at the time versus the receiver. There's a lot more. There's three of them on there, so you really need that solid one to be on there as well. So I do still think they're premium, but obviously where the game is, it's not the level of a wide receiver necessarily. So
that's a really good point. Yeah, that was great. Love your analysis there.
And with that, you kind of hit it on it. We hit on a touch with the running backs, the injuries and stuff like that. One of the things I kind of wanted to hit on is just the amount of notable injuries that we've seen this year. And maybe this is something normal, but to me, it seems this year these first 4 weeks, there's a ton of injuries that are very impactful that I don't think it doesn't seem like we've seen this amount of injuries in the past. And we obviously hit on it and every week and discuss it. But you have like on the screen here, you have guys like Bosa and Trent Williams who are now out multiple weeks for some significant injuries. And you're seeing a lot of, I think there are a decent amount of soft tissue injuries. You see obviously knees and more ACLs happening as well. And then a lot of like really key ankle sprains and stuff are hard to really get around. But again, the speculation I think people will always ask is a lot of these injuries, especially the soft tissues and whatnot, does that come from not playing any kind of preseason work? Because you can try your best to simulate anything you want in practice, right? But I think both you and I know as players, practice will never be the same as a game, even if you only are on there 1 or 2 series. That's not the same type of conditioning, type of movement, explosiveness as you necessarily have in a game. So, I just think it's interesting these first 4 weeks, how many significant injuries we've had to very key players. And I wonder if that stems from the lack of play that we see them perform and do in the actual preseason.
Yeah, very valid point. Only thing I can think of that might be similar to this is when, if you remember the COVID year, where everyone missed training camp, and I want to say there was a big influx of injuries that year, especially early on. Can't think of quite the names that got hurt. I know maybe Dak took a pretty big injury. That was more of a freak accident, that one. But there was a lot of big names that went out that year. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty similar. But yeah, this year has been shocking. And we always talk about, it's part of the game, but you have to start to think, is there some things that could help prevent these injuries, some type of structure or plan that could maybe help make the players, kind of not necessarily go through the preseason, but be able to simulate that, or, be able to in practice have some type of way to simulate that game-like experience, which is tough. Maybe the joint practices kind of are supposed to do that, but still they're not going 110% in those like a game. So sometimes soft tissues are just more, dehydration. It could be nutrition as well. We know about that. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. Tough to speculate, but overall, we definitely want to keep all the players as much as possible on the field, especially the bigger names.
Yeah. So just something we'll keep our eye on as the weeks go by, but just something that I noticed in particular, it seems like this year with the more and more players not participating in the preseason. So last 2 topics here that kind of tie together, Scott, that you want to kind of touch on. The first being kind of an underwhelming performance from AFC teams this year. Yeah,
I mean, it's been kind of that way, and it kind of ties into what you talked about in the very first episode of more of a competitive product and overall season for the NFL. And that's kind of playing a factor because you got guys like the Jaguars, the Jets, all of the Texans being competitive. And we weren't really expecting that. So every week is basically a battle. There's no give-me's in this league right now. I think that's good that's overall pretty good for the product. But still, you can see how it's being is messing with certain teams or doing things a little bit unconventional or trying to push the envelope, like you saw last night with the Broncos, because there is more pressure to kind of get these wins now because you don't have a person that you can circle on a schedule and pretty much expect a win now. It's just pretty unlikely right now, just based on how the football season is going. But more specifically, if we talk about this, the AFC West in general, we had a lot of high hopes, and they're playing each other twice a year. It's going to balance out a little bit, but you wouldn't expect so much ups and downs from like the Broncos and the Raiders, for example. The slow start, the Raiders got on the board last week. But yeah, just really slow starts from teams that have a lot of weapons, new coaches, but still a lot of promise and talent around them, or it's just not coming together just yet. But, I'm looking for that to change, like I said, in the next coming weeks now with kind of basically the preseason being over. Let's see how things kind of shake up with the AFC in particular.
Yeah, no, I think one of the stats that was very notable for me that I read this week is there's only 3 teams right now that are over 500 in the AFC, which is kind of astounding when you have as many teams that should be good in there as we do with the, just on here, you have Chiefs, Bengals, Chargers, Bills, what should be the Broncos and Raiders, right? Those teams that you think would be at least not more competitive, but almost dominant throughout the first part of the season. Again, I think it's only, you have the Dolphins, you have the Bills, and you have the Chiefs that are, I believe, the only teams above 500. So, it's definitely going to tie into the next thing is to hit on is you kind of touched on a little bit, but a lot of teams right now are 2-2 in the NFL. And it's been a talking point in the league. We saw Tom Brady was asked about it this week, and he said it comes from a lot of sloppy play from what he's seen, and his team is included in that. His team is 2-2 right now, right? I think it has led to a more competitive league, but the question is, is it good or bad? Is it because of competitive football, right, from high performing teams going head to head, or is it because there's a kind of like last night? Is there sloppy play going on that's leading to the quote unquote competitiveness and that we see more teams that are about even playing field versus teams separating themselves? And we have a list here. All these teams, there's 17 teams of the 32, so just over half the league on here, are the 2-2 teams with just a note real quick before you get into it, Scott. Indy and Denver last night. Denver is now 2-3, technically, so they were 2-2 before this week, along with the rest of these teams. Indy is now 2-1, so essentially on the same. These two teams on the same playing field as the rest of them. But what is your take on these 2-2 teams? Good or bad? Is it because of good play, sloppy play? How do you see it?
Yeah, I was just checking my notes right there. But yeah, I think it goes a little both ways, but I'm going to lean more on the side of this overall more competitive play like we just mentioned. I think there's a higher level of urgency this year, especially out the gate when, a lot of good matchups, but also just guys going for each other and making a better product, which I think all in all is better for the game of football. But then you have, Tom Brady talked about, ugly football. There was a couple games like last night we talked about, but a couple games prior that the 49ers versus Denver a couple weeks back, that was ugly. There's a handful of games I would say that kind of fit that, but I wouldn't say that's the overall consensus yet for the whole reason why we have all these teams of 2-2. I just think it's more higher level. Actually, I would say it's a higher level of football because you got these teams that are coming not as expected. They're coming out the gate, trying to prove the doubters wrong and playing more competitive football and not just rolling over for the other team.
Yeah, I know, and I think a lot of the talk around this topic in particular comes from the expectations of some of these teams on this list, right?
Exactly.
Obviously Broncos being the obvious one, people frustrated. You saw last night their fans, I think it kind of went viral, leaving the game before overtime even started.
Yeah, that's tough.
But those teams with higher expectations, like the Chargers, like the Broncos, like the Titans, like the Colts, right? They get these players in that are supposed to help their team. Teams like the Rams, who win the Super Bowl last year, right? At 2-2, kind of struggling. And then you've got teams like Atlanta and the Jets and whatnot, who historically over the last few years haven't been good, who are actually being competitive now. So I agree. It is. I think it comes more from a competitiveness across the board, and it helps with creating a better product for the NFL. But I think a lot of what what this stems from a topic of discussion is because these certain teams that we were expecting, that had all these high expectations to play at a high level, aren't, and so people are becoming frustrated, especially those fan bases in particular. So again, we'll see things. Maybe things will, again, preseason, teams got to kind of catch their footing, figure things out, and I think that also is what's going on here with this 2-2 scenario that's happening right now. But a lot of football left to be played, right? Let's see if some of these teams start figuring it out that we expect to, and kind of start separating themselves from the rest of the pack.
Just based on basic math, it's gonna eventually balance out in the next 3 to 4 weeks, probably, right? Just because teams are gonna definitely start to play each other more and more, and then there's gonna, those teams are gonna, be able to break that 500 mark, I would say. So yeah, we definitely have to revisit this in like 4 to 5 weeks, Jake, and see if the trend still is. We got a bunch of 4-4 teams or something crazy. That would be definitely something to dig deeper into.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us. A lot to talk about we had on this episode. Would love to hear from you guys as well on what your biggest takeaways from the first 4 weeks of the NFL season are. Do you agree with what we had? Or there's something else that you noticed that for this regular season's preseason almost. So, leave a comment, reach out to us on our social channels. Go follow us at Atavus Football. Comment, like, and subscribe. Next week, we have more of a fun topic coming from us. Here at Atavus, we talk about tackling a lot, and we're football guys, and a lot of times we're experts in the tackling realm as well, but we love talking about football in general. And with that, beyond being tackling guys and football guys like we're talking right now, we're sports and football enthusiasts. And one of those things that Scott and I keep hitting on is more of a fun topic, like I said, are the uniform discussions and things we see. And so next week we're gonna have a little bit of fun, and we'll start with college, and we'll probably at some point work our way to the NFL, but we're gonna rank our all-time top uniforms from college football. So we'll see what drip looked like back in the day, or if we favor what's being presented now. So be on the lookout for that next week. Scott and I will each have our own rankings going back, and we'll do kind of the basic uniform, the standard uniform for teams, and then also, because of the way college football is going right now, we'll rank also our top alternate uniforms as well. So kind of two fair categories. But be on the lookout for that next week once again, along with the normal news recap and highlights from the college and NFL fronts. But until then, Scott, thank you again. Thanks for your insight. Always good to get on here with you and do this every week.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Jake. Looking forward to the drip series next week. But yeah, appreciate you, man, and let's have a good weekend.
Yep, for sure. To all you guys out there, enjoy your weekend of football. Until next week, we are out.